Hi there, this is Chris Harper from HideGun.tech. Welcome to the final video of a mini-series on using CSS and colour animation with Microsoft Power Apps. Here's the button we're going to create today. Like others in earlier videos, it's primarily driven by CSS, and with small changes to the CSS code, you can create strikingly different effects. The technique I'll be using builds on that I've demoed in previous videos, in particular animation with CSS Part 1, so I recommend watching that first. So let's go ahead and create this button. So the first step is to create a HTML text box, and I'll set the dimensions of the box to 300 by 200 and I'll remove all of the padding. And then the next stage is to paste the CSS code there directly into the HTML box itself, and straight away you get to see the impact of that code. So as we've talked about before, the first and last lines are simply HTML defining a container for the CSS, so leave that untouched. The height parameter needs to be 1 pixel smaller than the HTML box itself. The border radius I'm going to set to 30. Across the board, and then the key line is the fourth one, the background line with the linear gradients. Now this currently has a directional parameter of 0 degrees, i.e. vertically upwards, which is exactly what I want, so I'm going to leave that unchanged. At the moment there are 2 tiers to the background gradient, red going to blue. Now I'm going to make this a 7-tier background by doing some cutting and pasting, which, there we go, that works. So that's currently 8 tiers, so I'm going to remove the final tier. There we go. So I want the first and the last tier to be red, and the middle 3 tiers to be red, like so. But I'm going to change the second and the 6th tier to an RGB color. And I'm going to define that as RGB 255, comma, and then I'm going to introduce a variable called vargreen, which straight away will break the CSS code because vargreen doesn't yet exist. 0 close brackets. Whoops, 2. Yep, I think that's right. Yep, so that's just flagging vargreen as not existing, which is spot on. So I'm just going to copy that and paste that here. There we go. So now we need to define the value of the variable vargreen, and to do that I'm going to insert a timer. And we're going to set the duration to 50 milliseconds, which is a 20th of a second. Repeat needs to be true. And for on timer end, I'm going to introduce a counter. So we will call that counter var counter, and we'll set the value to var counter plus 1. So it increments by 1 every time the counter completes a cycle. So now we're going to define the value of vargreen, and I'm going to use a sign function that I've used previously. So if this doesn't make sense, check out one of my previous videos in the series, and I'll explain exactly how this works. Previously, the value of this formula oscillated between 0 and 255, but I've changed this slightly for reasons I'll explain in a minute, so it oscillates between 128 and 255. Now I'm also going to introduce a label. so we can see the value of var green on screen. Can't see it at the moment because it's currently 0. So let's quickly run this app and see the effect and make sure everything's working. We'll start the timer. Okay, so straight away we can see the impact, and the label is showing the value of var green oscillating between 128 and 255 and having this effect, changing the colour of the second and the sixth tiers from mid, red and yellow, which is when var green's 128, to pure yellow, which is when it hits 255. So now let's go back and finish off by inserting a button and overlaying it exactly on the HTML as we've done before. Just slightly out. Let's make that 200. There we go. And I'm going to change the text to click me. We'll get rid of the padding. I'm going to change the fill color to be transparent. Let's have a black border. Border radius needs to be 30 to match the HTML box underneath. Set the font to Korean New and font size to 36. And then finally we will change the hover color to yellow, so the font color to yellow, and the fill to also be transparent. So the final piece in here is to define the color of the text. So that's currently white. Now I want that to reflect the value of var green that we apply to the second and the sixth tiers within the CSS. Now that's easily done. So if we go to color, so that's currently set to white, but I'm going to change the green parameter to var green. Now let me run the app again and we'll see the impact. Okay, that isn't quite the effect I was looking for, so I have done something wrong and I have left the value of the blue component at 255 when it needs to be 0. Let's try again. Perfect. That is exactly what I was looking for. So now you can see why I wanted to cap the lower limit of var green at 128, because if it went all the way down to 0, then the yellow would disappear completely and we'd have a blank red box, which isn't the effect that I'm looking for. But actually that looks quite striking, and as you can see, playing around with the code, there's lots of potential to create some really wacky neon type CSS effects with your Power Apps buttons. So finally, a quick summary of everything we've created in this short series on customizing Power Apps buttons. In the first video, beautiful Power Apps buttons using CSS, we created an attractive static button using a HTML text box and inline CSS. In the second video, animated Power Apps buttons, I used a variable to change the color of a button and then expanded that to use a sine function to create the pulsing effect you can see on screen. In Power Apps Animation with CSS Part 1, we returned to using CSS and employed a timer to change the background gradient parameter to create a striking rotational effect. And in this, the final video, we added the variables to the CSS color parameters to change the background gradient colors. So thanks for watching. More Power Apps stuff is available on my website at hiredgun.tech. Until next time, fare thee well.